Welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, this series explores core insights from mid-20th century sociology, particularly systems thinking and the structural functionalist tradition. These ideas were central to sociology in the mid-20th century, and our goal is to bring them back into the conversation as an essential perspective that helps explain how order is maintained, how groups adapt, and how pressure for change can be utilized for stability. Remember, each episode is just a starting point, an introduction that scratches the surface. The goal is to spark your curiosity and invite you to explore the foundations of the discipline more deeply. This episode builds on what we covered in earlier sessions. If you haven't watched them, I encourage you to go back and start there. In episode 1, we introduced systems thinking, a way of understanding the social world that focuses on interdependence, feedback loops, emergence, and the general idea of a social ecosystem. In episode 2, we explored the recursive relationship between structure and agency and considered how unintended consequences emerge from even well-meaning individual actions. Episode 3 examined a framework for understanding and preserving culture. In this episode, we're going to explore something that's both all around us and yet surprisingly invisible: social institutions and their interconnectedness. Now, right up front, let's clarify. When we use the word institution here, we're not just talking about a particular organization, like a school or a church, or even saying that someone is an institution in their field. We mean something more abstract, structured patterns of social life that persist over time and help organize society. These are the pattern structures that shape so much of our everyday lives. Our families, our schools, our workplaces, our churches, our governments. We often take them for granted, and yet they play a fundamental role in organizing our daily life, our communities, and even our sense of self. Why study institutions? Because they help us explain both stability and change. Institutions are the building blocks, the frameworks that allow societies to persist over time, transmitting values, organizing roles, and offering some predictability. By examining institutions carefully, we can also see how and why social change happens. And when something breaks down, when one institution begins to take on functions that used to belong to another, or when cultural lag leads to tension. In short, this perspective gives us tools to think more realistically and more creatively about how to strengthen our communities and navigate change in ways that promote well-being. While there's no single mid-century work that systematically lists or defines core social institutions as we do in this episode, there are thinkers who help shape the broader functionalist and systems-oriented view that informs this perspective. Their works are where you can turn to in order to start learning more than this brief introduction provides. They are, of course, the usual suspects. Emile Durkheim is known for emphasizing the role of social institutions in maintaining cohesion and moral order. One of his most relevant works here is The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, where he showed how religion, and more broadly rituals, bind people together by reinforcing shared meanings and values. Max Weber explored the ways institutions evolve, especially under the influence of rationalization and bureaucracy. His classic work, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, showed how religious ideas could shape economic institutions. He was particularly concerned with how rules, efficiency, and impersonality began to dominate modern institutions. And Talcott Parsons, who helped shape structural functionalism in the mid-20th century. He described institutions as parts of a social system that meet basic functional needs. So, what is a social institution? Here's a textbook definition. Social institutions are patterned, enduring systems of norms, values, and roles that organize key areas of social life. But for now, think of institutions as the building blocks of society, the frameworks that make societies possible. From a structural functionalist perspective, social institutions exist to meet basic social needs. They persist over time, not because someone is in charge of them, but because they become routinized and they are needed. People learn their roles, expectations are clear, and when institutions play a significant role in maintaining the current social system, they are kept around, so to speak. They provide structure and predictability, help transmit core values, and reduce the friction of everyday life. Let's take a deeper look at the 10 social institutions. We'll explore what needs they meet in society, what kind of roles and organizations they involve, and the values and expectations they might promote in any given society. These are essential parts of the social structure that shape our lives in ways both large and small. First, family. The family is often considered the most foundational institution because it's where socialization begins. Families regulate reproduction, nurture children, and provide emotional support. The roles here include parent, child, sibling, caregiver, and the associated expectations are powerful. Parents in our society are expected to protect and teach, children to obey and learn. Families are where we first learn values like loyalty, responsibility, and care. And while family forms vary across cultures, every society has a structure to organize reproduction and child rearing. In modern societies, families also shape access to education, healthcare, and even job opportunities. Next, religion. Religion addresses some of the most profound human questions. Why are we here? What happens after we die? Why is there suffering? Institutions of religion include churches, temples, mosques, and more informal gatherings. Roles include worshiper, clergy, monk, prophet, or disciple. Norms might include participation in rituals, tithing, or moral behaviors like honesty and compassion. Religion can legitimize social norms and the law, offer community, and shape public life. In many societies, religious calendars structure time, and religious values influence debates on family, education, and politics. 3. Education. The education system of a society transmits knowledge and skills across generations, but also much more. It socializes children beyond the family, teaches social norms, and often instills values like merit or discipline or fairness. Think of roles like student, teacher, principal, tutor. Norms include showing up on time, doing homework, respecting authority. Education connects with many other institutions. It prepares people for the workforce, collaborates with health systems for services, and increasingly takes on social work roles. Next, the economy. The economic institution is about producing and distributing goods and services. In our contemporary societies, it includes banks, corporations, trade unions, and small businesses. Roles now include worker, employer, consumer, investors. Norms might involve honesty in transaction, responsibility to pay debts, or striving for success. Values often emphasize efficiency, productivity, and innovation. The economy links to education through job training, government through regulation, and family as it shapes income and household stability. It's also a major source of identity. People often define themselves by their work. Number 5, government or politics. This institution allocates power and makes collective decisions and maintains public order. Organizations in our contemporary society include local councils, national legislatures, courts, and public agencies. Statuses include voter, citizen, president, senator, judge. Norms include obeying laws, participating in elections, and respecting due process. The government sets the framework within which other institutions operate. It often decides how resources are distributed, how conflicts are handled, and how rules are enforced. In democratic systems, legitimacy depends on participation and trust. Number 6, law and criminal justice. While related to government, this institution specifically enforces norms and resolves conflict through a formal system. It includes police departments, courts, prisons, and legal organizations. Roles include police officer, judge, defendant, parole officer. Norms emphasize due process, equal treatment, and justice. This institution clearly intersects with family, child custody, education, like school discipline, and economy when it comes to property rights. How laws are written and enforced reveals much about social priorities and values. Number 7, criminal justice. Medicine and health. While related to government, the medical institution is tasked with treating illness, supporting health, and caring for the dying. It includes police departments. It includes hospitals, clinics, insurance systems, and professional associations. Police officer, judge, defendant. Medicine also increasingly intersects with norms emphasize science, due process, law, and medicine. Equal treatment and justice. Expectations around access to care, public health, and health education vary widely and reveal tensions between institutions, like between the economy and government. When it comes to property rights. How laws Number are 8, and enforced science and technology. Reveals much. This institution develops and applies knowledge to understand and shape the world. Reveals much about in today's contemporary society includes values. Research labs, universities, tech firms, Number 7, and regulatory medicine bodies. And healthcare. The medical science influences is tasked with and is influenced by illness, economy, supporting health, medicine, and education. For the dying. It also plays a role in shaping public debate, clinics, especially when scientific findings have ethical or political medicine implications. Also increasingly intersects Number 9, military. Science, law, and medicine. The military provides defense and protection around both from external threats and public health and health education very widely and reveal tensions. Organizations in our society include branches of the armed forces, economy, National Guard, and military academies. Number 8, the military intersects with government. This institution develops as a major employer and applies knowledge and technology to understand and shape as a driver of innovation. In today's contemporary in many societies, it also plays a role in shaping national identity and regulatory bodies. And finally, mass media. Science media institutions and is influenced disseminate by information, economy, medicine, shape and opinion, education. And provide entertainment. It also plays a role in shaping public debate. In our contemporary world, when media include TV networks, newspapers, radio stations, social media platforms, Number 9, military. Houses. The military provides media connects to all other institutions. External threats and it reports on them, critiques them, and sometimes reinforces organizations or undermines them. Include branches of the armed forces. It's also a primary National way Guard in which culture is transmitted and contested these days. The military intersects with government, economy as a major employer. As you can see, each institution plays a unique role, but none exist in isolation. They form a dense network of interdependence. Education prepares individuals for the workforce, which feeds the economy. Religion shapes moral frameworks that influence law. Media amplifies messages from science, politics, and religion. When one institution shifts, others must adjust in response. This system's perspective allows us to better understand both resilience and vulnerability. Strong institutions help societies function smoothly, but when roles and expectations change, strain develops. Let's narrow in on a key idea: core social institutions. Having heard the needs met by these institutions, which four or five would you guess that anthropologists and sociologists argue are absolutely essential for any society, no matter how small or isolated, how complex or primitive in its structure? From a complex society of over 1 billion people to a tribe of 30 hunter-gatherers. Which institutions do you think are absolutely essential? Remember, these institutions are defined by the function they serve. Education fulfills the function of teaching younger generations how to survive and thrive, however that looks in that society. So pause, take a minute, look through this list of 10, and give me 4 or 5 that you think are absolutely crucial. What did you come up with? Did you say family? So remember, family is considered a most fundamental institution because it's where socialization begins. Children are protected and raised and socialized. So this is certainly seen as one of the fundamental core institutions that any society must have. What about education? Is that on your list? So again, the education system transmits knowledge and skills across generations that will allow those newer generations to survive and hopefully thrive. So this is a core function. Is the economy on your list? Economic systems produce and distribute goods and services. In our society, those services are banks and corporations and small businesses. In another society, it's simply the set of mechanisms whereby clothing and food and other items are produced and distributed among that group. A core function. What about government and politics? So this institution makes decisions, maintains public order, and allocates power. This could be done through a vast bureaucratic body, or it could be a council of 3 people. And finally, one that is sometimes debated: religion. Religion answers the fundamental questions about human existence. Why do people suffer? What's the purpose of life? These issues must be addressed in order for that culture to thrive. Understanding social institutions as a network of interdependent systems allows us to anticipate ripple effects. When one institution shifts or fails, others are affected. This also helps explain why we sometimes see stress or conflict. Institutions may begin taking on roles they hadn't been performing in the social system. For example, schools may be expected to provide parenting, nutrition, and mental health counseling. Religious organizations, in many times and places, may act as de facto welfare agencies. Likewise, governments may now handle roles that once were held by extended kin, like elder care or income support. As roles shift, we may get institutional mismatch or strain. And the question of what institutions should be doing for a particular society and to what extent is an important one. In fact, determining what institutions should contribute to a society and where their boundaries lie is one of the central challenges of social organization. Debates about what institutions ought to do and how much responsibility they should carry are at the heart of many social and political disagreements. This kind of analysis also helps us understand why reform is hard. When we try to change one part of the system, say revise school curriculum or overhaul healthcare, we often run into obstacles in other parts. These are feedback loops and structural constraints we need to plan for. To really understand how an institution is working and to evaluate for ourselves whether an institution is working well, we have to consider, among other things, the bigger picture, how it connects with other institutions and the roles they're playing too. You might also remember the idea of cultural lag from episode 3. Social institutions may change at different rates. Technology may race ahead while legal or moral systems don't. This creates tension and uncertainty, and sometimes the mistaken belief that a single institution is to blame for a broader problem. But what was the source of that original change, for example? Could other institutions be responding in a way that is wiser? Before we move on, it's worth remembering that this kind of institutional interconnection isn't limited to the national level. We can observe these patterns of mutual influence and adaptation within local communities, across different regions within a country, or even globally. Institutions often function differently depending on their setting, but the need to work together remains a constant. So let's explore how these dynamics play out through a specific example: a statewide shift to year-round schooling. Imagine a Midwestern state, fairly average in terms of population and economy, that has just passed a bold education reform. All public schools will move to a year-round calendar with shorter breaks spread throughout the year and a later daily start time. The change is based on strong research. Students learn better with frequent breaks and more sleep. But this reform doesn't happen in isolation. At first, the changes seem manageable. Teachers adjust their lesson plans, parents figure out new routines. But as summer approaches, ripple effects begin to emerge. Local businesses that depend on summer camps and youth employment begin to struggle. Daycares, once able to offer part-time summer options, find they need to hire more full-time staff year-round. Some parents push employers for flexible schedules to handle different childcare gaps. In turn, companies begin shifting work hours, and city planners start noticing changes in traffic patterns. Churches, who've always held vacation Bible school in June, now find that families are unavailable. They begin experimenting with evening programs or weekend retreats, but attendance is down. Meanwhile, counselors and pediatricians, once able to plan around the school calendar, now need to maintain full staffing throughout the year. In one small city, the local police department revises its patrol hours to better match new teen schedules. And a nearby Air Force recruitment center notes a drop in summer enlistments as students are no longer free to attend training camps. By the second year of the policy, things begin to stabilize, but they've changed. A new system of expectations, roles, and norms has emerged. Let's zoom in on two communities and see how their responses differed. In Maple Glen, a small but civically engaged town, the city council anticipated these ripple effects. One of its members had studied sociology and immediately saw the policy not just as an educational change, but as a shift that would reverberate across multiple social institutions. The council formed a task force that included leaders from local churches, the Chamber of Commerce, law enforcement, and pediatric clinics. Together, they mapped out potential challenges and brainstormed adaptations. As a result, local businesses adjusted hours early. Churches coordinated shared childcare programs, and the school system worked with health providers to keep support services aligned. In contrast, Brookville, a nearby town of similar size, approached the change as strictly an education issue. They focused solely on classroom logistics and teacher contracts. No efforts were made to involve leaders from other institutions. In fact, there was resistance to anyone else getting involved. When ripple effects emerged, declining youth employment, increased demand for childcare, and unsuccessful summer camps and loss of tourism money, leaders were caught off guard. Summer camps closed, youth crime spiked slightly, and parents protested the lack of support. The mayor blamed the school board. The school board blamed state policy. What's the difference between the two outcomes? Not just planning, but a systems mindset. Maple Glen's leaders understood that institutions are interconnected. They didn't just react, they anticipated. They applied exactly the kind of sociological systems thinking we've been developing throughout this series. A naive interpretation of this story might ask, which town had better teachers? Which school had the better test scores? But those are only pieces of the puzzle. What this story shows is that communities thrive when they recognize and work with the full ecosystem of institutions, not in isolation, but together. To wrap up, here are a few questions to help you reflect on the concepts we've explored in this episode. How do the ideas in this session build on, or possibly contrast with, some of the key points from earlier episodes in this series? Can you think of a time when a change in one setting like your school, workplace, or community ended up affecting other areas of your life in ways you didn't expect? If your state made this change to the education system, which social institutions would you focus on to help your community adapt well? What kinds of changes would you encourage? And do you think any other social institution might end up taking on functions that used to belong to schools? Finally, imagine that most workplaces shift to a 4-day work week. What changes would you anticipate? And how could systems adjust? Thanks for exploring these ideas with us. In our next episode, we'll shift focus from institutions to the role of power and influence in everyday life. See you in episode 5.